Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here today. We have a great session today. Unlike our previous campfires, this one is not too technical. This one is more business oriented, but it's still very important. I've always felt that developing a product is only 5% of the work. Getting more than a few people to pay for your software over a period of time, that's 95% of the work. This is, in essence, this presentation is about that just putting an application out there doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be successful. There are other factors that you have to take into account before you can take your product to market and consider it a success and have people pay you over a period of time. We are fortunate to have with us today James Mitchell. He's the CEO of Autosoft, based in Sydney, Australia. Good morning, James.
Morning, Riaz. Thanks for having me.
I know it's 5 a.m. over there, but thanks for being with us.
It's nice and early, but that's all good.
Yeah. So Autosoft is a provider of software to manage automotive workshops in Australia, and they have a Windows-based application that has been fairly successful. It is a high-end product. A few years ago, James launched workshop software to target very small workshops that couldn't afford their own IT infrastructure. And the purpose of this was to go towards the low end of the market and attract a completely new user base, a large number of users out there, and see what we could do with them. We also have Oliver, whom you all know and love. He was responsible for architecting the software. So Oliver, good morning.
Good morning.
To you, we are in the afternoon. So as I mentioned, workshop software is a completely new product for a new market. Autosoft originally had a version in the market for a couple of years, but it failed to find any traction. By that I mean that it was in the market, but there were not many users. One reason was that it didn't have a proper accounting system, which James felt was very important to have this application be a success. And the application that Autosoft was considering was Xero, which is a very popular small business accounting software in Australia and New Zealand. So Autosoft initially came to Murtec to help with this Xero integration with his existing application. And this eventually evolved into a full rewrite of the software. It took about 4 or 5 months for us to develop the software from scratch with a completely new UI and a completely new platform with all open source tools. So this one is a completely open source system. The new software was launched in May of 2014, and since then, in just the 6 months, 7 months it's been in the market, has been a huge success. Along the way, we learned a lot of things, and that's what this presentation is about. That, you know, what are the things that really make a successful cloud-based application? So there are really two views of a cloud application. You know, there's a user view and a developer view. So the user view of a cloud is very simple. The user is looking for a great user experience on all devices. So, you know, if you think about mobile devices such as cloud-based apps, such as Google Docs, which have very simplified user interfaces, users have gotten used to having a simple user interface, unlike their Windows application, and they need to be very functional and intuitive. Second thing that they're looking for is that this software, the user experience that they're looking for, should have great feature and functionality, but it should be available at the right price. It should be available to them reliably. That means that whenever they log on, whether it's 1 a.m. in the morning or 11 p.m. at night, it should work. It should be available to them, and it should be secure. And it should work the same way at any time and from anywhere. And the anytime, anywhere is something that we will go into a little bit why it's important. From a developer perspective, though, we look at things a bit differently, right? So the developer looks at is that a cloud application must run on any infrastructure as a service. So whether it's Amazon or it's Azure or Rackspace or whatever platform you use, that's kind of what comes to your mind, that, you know, you put your application on Amazon and all of a sudden you're a cloud application. It should be device independent, so the design choices you make and how you design your application has to be rethought. Windows provided you with a functional API, user interface, sorry, and what that meant was that Microsoft defined how your user interfaces will be developed, and pretty much everybody followed that. But now, if you look at the number of applications that are out there, they all have different different user interfaces based on the need of that application. So designing this software has a completely new dimension to this. Second, and this cloud application should also be completely self-serving and self-managing, meaning you don't go in and you can go into Hotmail and sign up for a Hotmail account any time of day and night, and everything is up there and available to you. So that's very, very important for a cloud application. It should be very, very secure. Now, with all this thing going with Sony and hacking and North Korea and all that, but security is always very important. People didn't think about this before. When you were deploying application on your desktop, your organization infrastructure provided a level of security, and you were completely isolated. But when an application is running on the cloud and you put your data on the cloud, you expect it to be very secure. And this application should work across different time zones. And what that means is that, if you are doing a transaction at a given point in time, it needs to take into account where you are geographically and how it affects the system and how the system responds to that. And we'll go into this a little bit. Another important thing that's taking traction nowadays is the ecosystem. So in the past, when you had a Windows-based application, you would just have a reseller or signed up a channel and had them resell your software. But what about a cloud-based application? How do you sell that cloud-based application? So one of the ways of selling them is that you exist as ecosystems. So for example, when Autosoft wanted to integrate Xero into their application, in essence, Workshop software became a software in the marketplace of Xero, and Xero has a large marketplace. So any Workshop mechanic who is looking to go to Xero would be able to find Autosoft as a supported platform and would be able to come to this. And James will explain a little bit what was the impact of that, supporting that on his customer acquisition technique. Secondly, you will also have a way of, you should also have a way of creating your own ecosystem. What that means is that somebody else might find your large application very useful, and they might want to use a piece of that application, and they might want to support that. So this leads us to a trend, which is APIs, serving APIs and API management and security across APIs. And that's very important for a developer to keep in mind. And the other thing is that there is an early mover advantage. Cloud is still developing. There are a whole lot of more applications in Windows than on the cloud. But those who come there and establish themselves and create a beachhead for themselves find that they are very successful if they execute it properly. So we are all using these kind of we are all using these cloud applications, it's Hotmail, Google Apps, all of this stuff. So that's not something that we want to go into detail, but you guys know what it means. Now, Workshop software, and this is a comparison of what it was before and what it is now. So the first thing was that the user experience was not considered. And what it meant is that whatever the system application was developed, whatever the UI, default UI it came with, that was put out there. Afterwards, the big impact was that we redesigned the UI keeping the user experience in mind, and some of the comments that James got from the customers was that, hey, it's much easier to use now. So there's this concept of just having a functional UI versus thinking about the UI and the user experience. The better the user engagement, the more chances of success you have. The first one was completely Windows-based. So even if you're running on the cloud, Windows has a typically higher cost. I think there's a 30–40% higher cost than running on Linux. This new system is running completely on open source, is Linux-based and Ruby on Rails. And eventually, these kind of decisions have an impact on your pricing, which also has an effect on how many customers you're going to get. Security was not something that was considered. It was just, this is what out of the box it was. So it was an afterthought. In the second case, now it was well thought out. It was considered a high priority, and we built a system that is very secure. The fourth item is integration challenges. Because Autosoft or Workshop Software wanted to be a part of Xero's marketplace, and Xero was using OAuth authentication, which was, I think James had tried to do this for over 2-3 weeks, didn't really work, and that's where they had come to us. What we found is that using these other tools, these kind of things are not even an issue. They're very easy to do. You can get these things done very quickly because there are modules already built by somebody around the world that you could use and overcome some of these challenges. Inadequate time zone handling. So one example that we'll go into is that Autosoft Workshop Software actually sends out text messages, and why this time zone handling ends up being an issue, and why we gave it a consideration in this. The other thing was this speed. What we found was that the platform itself inherently was not very scalable. What it means is that if you're going to be on the cloud, you can expect several thousand users, and if you're really successful, tens of thousands of users. Well, you want your platform to be fast, but at the same time, it should be elastic. It should grow with the users. So that part was a challenge, is that how would we build a system that's completely self-managing, self-serving, knows when to scale up, when to scale down, and the costs affected because of that, because your licensing requirements are different. When you're using a larger instance, you pay more, etc. So all those things come into play, and this leads into higher cost of ownership over a long period of time. So you might make compromises to design systems based on being productive as a programmer, but you pay a higher cost in terms of ownership over a long period of time. So these are some of the things that we learned, and these are the main points that differentiate the old system from the new system. And some of the, if I were to summarize, what are the lessons learned for us? Most important, user must have a terrific experience with your software. It should be well designed, intuitive, simple, consistent across different devices, and must be really fast. This is really a paramount importance. Security is high on users' minds. It's not something that can be easily ignored. You need to be careful about the choices you make. Performance is very, very high, so your software overall should perform very well. And you should have the ability to exist in other people's ecosystem, and you should have the ability to build your own ecosystem, because in the long run, these are the things that are going to matter in customer acquisition as well as the success of your business. And the other thing that we learned is that there's tons of stuff out there developed in the open source community. If you want a library XYZ, certain type of date picker, certain type of this, it's easily available. We just pick him. You're done integrating that in 5 minutes. Any new programmer can do that. And what that does is that there's a huge productivity gain, because you're leveraging the collective development power of all the developers around the world, and somebody has done something that you'll find. If not, you'll find the answers to that, or you'll find a good starting point for that. So in essence, so these are some of the bigger picture items that I wanted to present to you. And now I'm going to switch over to James to give an overview of his application and explain a bit about what the application does, and so you guys have an idea of how things work. And then we're going to have some question answers, and I have some questions for James that I'm sure you'll find informative, and you're also open to ask any questions at any time. Okay, James, you're on.
Sure. Thanks very much, Riaz, and great introduction. Look, just to give a little bit of background as to how Workshop Software came about. What Riaz has suggested in the beginning there was, Autosoft, we've been a Dataflex software house for 30 years actually, and look, you know, Dataflex as a development application has served us extremely well and continues to do so, and we still have a very viable Windows application which we still sell, and it is something that we go out and we sell that for a few $1,000s upwards, and it serves us very well in that particular marketplace. The challenge that we had was we got lots and lots and lots and lots of inquiries of people coming to us wanting some very, you know, relatively simple application at a relatively, you know, at a decent price. And what we found was that these guys were going off and buying our competitors' inferior, typically Windows products, or in fact they were always Windows products, and we knew that we were missing out on that marketplace. But what we also found was that they were going out and buying some inferior product that really didn't work the way it should work and wasn't effective for their business. And so we felt that we were doing them a disservice by not providing them with something that was actually decent and worked. And so, and I also had a vision for, I realized that the cloud was a place where you know, software development was going. And so for quite some time, I tried a few different options to develop cloud applications, including doing it in-house, including doing it outsourced but cheaply, and then the third option that came about was using, you know, Riaz's team and getting their help on the development sort of side of you know, workshop software and stuff like that. And that was so we failed twice, and the third time around we've you know, so far has been quite successful. And I think the beauty of where we're at today is that I see a fantastic future for what workshop software can achieve for us, and there's some exciting things that we're working on at the moment with some partners in the industry, which is you know, one of the things that Riaz mentioned there was about, you know, the ecosystem and what happens with you know, other organisations that we can partner with, and there's a couple of partnerships that we've developed and developing at the moment, which is hugely exciting for us in terms of number of users that can come on board and their exposure into the yeah, into where things go. So just to, do you want me to, Riaz, would you like me to maybe show the old and the new application just from a particular, you know, just a look and feel first up, and then maybe just show some of the features of workshop software? Is that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So yep. This is an invoice screen. What you can see on your screen at the moment is the invoice screen for workshop software. So you can see, one of the things that I was sort of pretty taken with, to be honest, when this first came about, was it was so easy to, a user could look at this and really understand it. There wasn't, one of the challenges that I had with coming to a cloud application was that I start this application at $49 a month. Now, $49 a month, I can't afford to have a team member spend hours and hours and hours with clients and you know, and not get great value out of, you know, them using an application. I can't spend lots and lots of time with these people. It needs to be, it becomes a numbers game as opposed to what we had in the past, which was Windows. We had thousands of dollars. We charged for training. We charged for implementation, you know, and we made good money out of those things. This is a different ball game, and so this comes all down to you know, the number of users that we could get on board, how simply and quickly and effectively we could get them on board, and it needed to be something that they could go and do themselves without, in most instances, without them contacting us at all, or if they needed to contact us, it was going to be a short and with them on their way fairly quickly. And so the look and feel of the application was something that was vitally important to us, and you know, I was really impressed with the look and feel of how the application works and the usability of it. Sorry, excuse me, the functionality of it as well. And you can see that it's pretty well laid out, you know, even down to things like, you know, the icons that are there, and you know, how the buttons work and things like that were really something that was really great to look at. Just to give you a comparison, this is the application that we created in-house, which was a you know, look, a web app application. And look, again, look, this worked pretty well. You know, it had selection lists and stuff like that. And some of the parts of this were, you know, quite good in terms of its functionality and what it did. It was actually relatively simple to use, but one of the challenges that we found with this was it was hard for us to actually change the functionality of the user screen. Sorry, can you hear the kookaburras in the background? It's probably not something that everybody hears. I don't hear them all that often either. They only happen very early in the morning, but they're quite loud out there. You know, the look and feel of how it looks and operates and stuff like that was, you know, while it was okay, for example, things like displaying this on an iPad, it didn't display correctly on an iPad, and certainly didn't. It wasn't responsive on a mobile phone and other tablet devices and things like that. So that was one of the challenges that we had with this, you know, old piece of software. The other challenge too was deploying it. And look, in fairness, I could have deployed it on other infrastructure, but I had this on our own hosted server. It was an external server, a hosted server, and so I was concerned about things like security, you know, even backing it up, the security of the data, you know, the security of people hacking into the system, you know, those sorts of things were things that were some challenges. But yeah, the usability of it too was a little bit more, was less intuitive than if you come here, you can kind of get the, you know, the understanding of what things do and how things work and stuff like that. The other side of it was the integration as well. So one of the things that we do is integrate with Xero. I can sort of show you the Xero settings. There's actually not a lot to see with Xero, to be quite honest, because it just all happens in the background. So Xero is a really popular accounting package in Australia and New Zealand. It's something that there's hundreds of thousands of users that are using Xero at the moment, and it's expanding globally as well, and it's certainly the most popular accounting application in terms of growth in Australia, and it has a really big ecosystem as well, and they're actually quite proactive with the partners, and almost all accounting firms in Australia are on board with Xero. And so when a workshop goes to an accountant and says, hey, I want to get some management software, or really any business goes to an accountant and says, I want to get some, you know, some business management software, they go to the Xero ecosystem and they go and search for an add-on. And so you know, that was one of the areas that we saw was a great opportunity for us to expand our user base, you know, quite quickly and quite effectively, which was something that was, you know, quite good. So basically, you set it up, you authorize it. It uses this OAuth as its authentication process, which was a challenge. We couldn't get that working in Dataflex, and yeah, and off you go, set up some accounts, and it really just happens all in the background, all seamlessly. So it's actually quite straightforward and works really well. And yeah, and the guys at Xero are really pleased with what we've done as well. The other partnership arrangement that we've created is, if I just jump back into an invoice here, is this button here is actually an integration into Repco. Now, for our international guests, might not have heard of Repco, but Repco is a household name in Australia. They are the biggest spare parts supplier in Australia by far. You know, and it's literally, you know, even if you're not in automotive, you would know Repco as a name. They have hundreds and hundreds of stores around Australia. They deal with virtually every single workshop in Australia as well. The interesting thing around this arrangement was that they came to us, saw workshop software, and went, wow, cloud application. They were really excited about the opportunity to work with us, not only with Autosoft, our Windows application, but particularly with workshop software, it being a cloud application. They've got this online ordering system, and I won't go into a whole lot of detail on it, but basically, if I click on the add button here, I can add multiple things, and there's a whole lot of things I can do, but I don't think that's important. But if I click here and go return parts, this now goes back and returns the parts back onto the invoice, and this set of pads here has now been automatically added onto the invoice. But to take that a whole lot steps further, and I'm not necessarily here to show you all about how workshop software works, but we click on order now, it goes and orders them, and it's a whole seamless process that a workshop can do to deal with Repco and buy and sell parts, or automatically. And this is one of the biggest frustrations that a workshop has, finding the right part number, having to type them in all the time, making sure they get the right part number, all of those sorts of things are a really key area of a workshop as to how it operates and stuff like that. So this integration with Repco is a real big thing for us. It's actually just recently been completed, so we're just rolling it out now. We've got some beta test sites using this, but we see that this is going to add hundreds and hundreds and potentially thousands of users, and Repco are really on board with pushing this, and they see this as a really big partnership as well. There's another big partnership that we're working on with a very large player in the automotive industry called Capricorn, and that's another great partnership as well, which they're quite excited about workshop software too. So yeah, so that's a couple of really interesting partnerships that I think that API cloud, new application development is something that surprised me. I actually wasn't prepared for that, because in all honesty, what I originally thought workshop software was going to do was, my original idea was something really cheap, really simple, very, very simple in terms of functionality, and it was something that could just service that low end of the market, but was also something that maybe got people stepping up into Autosoft, into our Windows application, and spent a whole lot more money. And what's actually happened is that workshop software is actually going to be an application that is certainly stand on its own 2 feet, and is something that is going to grow very quickly, I believe, and is growing very quickly. And yeah, and I see a lot more functionality going to workshop software than what I had originally anticipated. And so we've got some interesting future development plans for where we take workshop software as well. But just real quickly on a functionality point of view, a couple of things. It's got to be really simple to use. So we have this one-click system, which I love. So you click here and you go, create a payment or create a stock order, so you can jump straight into places that you want to go for. Do it. Some of the searching sort of stuff, you can go and search for things very, very simply and very quickly. There's this global search as well. So if we type in a couple of characters, it goes and searches across a whole lot of separate tables. And again, there's this one-click sort of functionality, so I could create an invoice, I can send an SMS, or I can go and look at their latest invoice and certain things. So in some of the search areas, there's different things that you can do to really quickly get to the place where you want to go to and things like that. So yeah, so look, is that enough for you? Do you want me to go into more detail on it, or I think that possibly gives people a bit of an idea of the look and feel and very briefly the functionality. I can of course go into a lot more detail, but I'm not sure that that's necessarily what we're here for this morning. No,
I think you gave a pretty good idea. But the main thing is the differentiation. But I have a question for you. If you were to, looking at your old application that you had in the market for some time, and then transforming that mindset into looking at the cloud application in this way, what are the 2-3 key attributes that you would describe has been the catalyst for success of workshop software, and will continue to drive that in the future?
Yeah, look, I think that it's the usability of it. This very simple but very effective way of being able to drive the application, I think, is something that we as a team are really confident about as well. So myself and my team, in fact, I don't really have a lot of day-to-day, hands-on, in fact, probably no hands-on stuff with clients directly. My team handles that for me. But they're really confident about its usability, how simple it is, and how effective it is. And I think that was one of the real key things, whereas, to be honest, with the previous application, we probably weren't, our heart wasn't in it. Whereas we're looking at this now, and and particularly when you get the biggest automotive organization come to you and go, hey, I want to partner with you, Yeah, that sort of, you look at that and go, that's, that's a pretty big pat in the back, to be honest. And, and they're, not only do they want to partner with us, they really want to drive this forward. They see this as a big plus for them to be able to sell parts. So, they're right behind this. And so, yeah, it was the usability, I think, the confidence that we've got in that this is been done right. And look, if I'm to be completely honest, with myself, that we probably tried to do it maybe a little bit too much on the cheap in the past before, and maybe didn't have our. And as I said, the original concept for me was probably not what it's actually eventuated to be pretty quickly. Was not the original idea of what I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be a bit of a sideline application that would bring us in a few dollars and have a number of users using it, and it would be good. But it was just going to stop there. And if people wanted more functionality, they could get more functionality by moving to our Windows application, and we'd probably move that Windows application to the web over time as well. So yeah, it's a little bit different in terms of mindset for me. And the other, just future looking into this, one of the things I love about this is it's always been my goal to go global, and there's a great opportunity for us to take this global. And and a true cloud application allows you to do that. Whereas I found that challenging with the Windows application, from an installation, from a distribution, that sort of thing, and that's any Windows application really, I think is a lot more difficult to deploy, particularly internationally. So does that answer your question, Riaz?
Yeah. Well, I think that,
on a tangent there, but
no, that's fine. That's fine. I mean, I think that people are interested in knowing. I mean, I have a question here that keep showing the user interface feature. So I'll come to that. So basically, what you're saying is that a great application at the right time, which is the early mover advantage I talked about, is what is opening up a lot of these opportunities for you. I mean, just having an application is not enough. You had that application in the market for a while, but didn't get you the kind of attention because this one just fits in with what people expect. It works well on mobile. It has this user interface that's nice, and on top of that, it's something that with the ecosystem integrations that you've had gives you that early mover advantage. Meaning your competitors, even if they try to come up with something similar, will take them a bit of a time, and in that time you can create the market share for your business.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and that was that's proving to be quite important, because I think that the integration with Xero, for example, is very much one of the challenges that we've had for years and years and years with Autosoft, with our Windows application, has been the accountants would say, it's not. It used to be MYOB. You should use MYOB, which is a very popular accounting package in Australia, and been overtaken by Xero, to be honest. But there was always this resistance from accountants to in a sense let their customers buy management software. And it's funny, I don't know how it works in the rest of the world, but here in Australia, the accountants seem to have a very tight hold on many of their clients, and we often got people saying, well, sorry, I'm not going to buy Autosoft because my accountant doesn't think it's the right thing for me. I go, well, do you think it's the right thing for you? Yeah, we do, but and so that sort of argument has moved as well. So, and we're looking at integrating with some other accounting packages as well. So we're going to integrate with Quicken, which is from Reckon Software, which probably most of our international attendees would be familiar with Quicken. And we're going to integrate with MYOB as well, just from a backward compatibility, because lots of companies in Australia are using MYOB too. So,
James, I have a question here which I think is partly for you and partly for myself. Is that talk about how your tech team interacted with the Murtec tech team. So, you want to take?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, look, this was it's an interesting question. Well, great question. One of the challenges that I have had is the outsourcing of my development, because see, my background is actually development. So I'm actually a Dataflex developer. For a number of years, though, I haven't really done a lot of Dataflex development, so I've had other people doing that for me. But we've been a development house and developed our applications internally, and so it was a real big leap of faith, change of mindset. That was a real big thing, and took a lot of time to get my head around doing that, and and making sure that that was the right thing to do. One of the challenges that we had doing this internally, because we did kind of try to do this sort of application internally, but you probably need 4, 5, 6 people to go and do this sort of application with different skill sets, and we didn't have the skill sets. We might have had the skill sets to do maybe the back-end development, but we didn't have the skill sets, for example, to do the front-end development, or there might have been integration stuff and all sorts of different sort of things that require different types of development, is something that was the big challenge for us. So it was, look, I knew Riaz. I've had a loose relationship with Riaz for very many years, although we'd never done business together, although we'd gotten on personally fairly well on the, less than a handful of times that we've met each other at conferences and what have you, probably only 3 or 4 times. But we've kind of stayed in touch and loosely, to be honest, and but I sort of had some confidence in Riaz and his team, or let's before knowing Riaz's team, but certainly confidence in Riaz, and we discussed a few things, and over time we worked out what was going to be required, and so ended up taking that leap of faith to Riaz. We came to an agreement that of how we were going to work it and what we were going to do, and Riaz mentioned to me about the guys that he had on his team and what sort of people that he had, and those sorts of things, and what sort of development they'd done in the past, and that gave me the confidence to to take that big leap of faith, to be quite honest. And the other challenge with it is its location. So other side of the world was something that was a big factor as well. So it's not like you can jump on a plane or drive down the road and go and sit with the development team and go, hey guys, what's going on with this, or what's going on with that sort of thing. It's a bit different with you guys being over in the States. So a couple of things, a couple of big factors there, but look, so far it's worked exceptionally well.
Yeah. From our side, what I would mention is that initially when James came to me, we were looking at addressing primarily the integration issue, right? And how to get that old web app application working with Zero and all of that. And when we started looking into that, and this is something that is is the importance of bringing in new ideas. And we actually asked James, is that, okay, where do you want to go with this application? What do you want to see? And why not think bigger? I think that's a discussion James, you and I had a lot of time. And then we actually built this UI and showed to James what can be done in terms of the user experience from old to the new. And I think that our team did a great job in coming up with it, because we didn't have any knowledge of the domain, that his business side of things, but we now know pretty much everything that there needs to be known. But the approach was that there are 5, 6, 7 different skills, and this is why I'm a great believer of having the UI not being confined to some macro or some wizard or whatever it is. In today's world, you need to design great UI. The user engagement is so much more important than just putting an application out there. So your system has to be able to accept that and handle it. And we put together a team. We actually have a dedicated user experience person who designs these UIs, and that's what he does primarily. We have a front-end developer who is familiar with all of these Angular and other things that we work on it. We have, and this one was completely, Dataflex was completely not in the picture at all, because we just couldn't do the things we wanted to do with it. Well, actually, Evolution would allow us to do those things, but with the old way, we couldn't do it. So we decided to go with Ruby on Rails, and that's where I think that probably I should ask Oliver this question. Oliver, tell us something about the decision to choose a particular development tool and platform, and why it paid off in this case.
Yeah, so the decision to go with Ruby on Rails in this case, one of the things that was very beneficial when we went and looked at other frameworks, we do have DataFlex expertise, of course. And so being able to reuse some of those skills was one of the things we wanted to capture that way. And Ruby on Rails actually has a lot of similar concepts to the way we were developing applications in DataFlex anyways. And so it had, this advantage that although we had to learn a new language and a new framework, many of the concepts carried over. But then you also get all of these other benefits from using a system like this, from the standpoint of being able to grow it, to integrate with a lot of the other systems very easily. All of that sort of stuff just comes with it. But this wasn't a situation where we went in and said, okay, well, we're a Ruby on Rails shop. This is what we're going to do it in. We looked at what we were going to build, what was needed here from the growth standpoint, all of those things, and we chose a solution that worked for this situation. And I think really that's the key to this is not trying to use a hammer on everything. Taking a look at what the actual goals are of the individual, and basically designing a solution that uses whatever language that requires, those sorts of things. And in this case, Ruby ended up working out very well.
Okay. So one of the things that I mentioned during the presentation is time zone handling, and that kept coming up, and that's very important. Oliver, talk to us about how that plays a role in workshop software, and where is the importance of that?
Yeah, so you mentioned it in relation to text messaging. To go a little bit further with it, one of the things that you need to be able to do on a hosted application that is going to be used across multiple time zones on a cloud-based application like this is deal with situations where a time ends up becoming a very important aspect of a decision. So in the case of workshop software, we have things like automated text messaging with reminders that are part of the software. And we needed to know what time zone the workshop was in, which is which is very possibly a very different time zone than where our server is hosted. We need to know what that time zone is so that we don't do things like send people reminder text messages in the middle of the night and wake them up. You have to consider things like this. And it goes over into other areas as well. Whenever we generate a time from the system, we have to go and look at what that workshop's time zone is, not what the server's time zone is, so that we record it for the proper day if we're near a day boundary, for instance. All of those things end up becoming extremely critical for a cloud-based application, and you can't ignore them. If you ignore them right off the bat, you're going to be in a world of hurt. And of course, if you try and roll your own solution for that, you'll also feel it, because dates and date times are a complex topic in and of themselves. So using a system that has this built-in support for multiple time zones is very critical if you're going to have a cloud-based application that you want to have used globally potentially.
Great. So James, coming back to the software itself, is there like 2 or 3 UI features that you really like about this new system that you'd like to share? I think there's a question about some of the other UI aspects that you might want to show. I think the global search is something that that's certainly very useful.
Yeah. Look, it needed. We're dealing with with motor mechanics, so there's a couple of factors that you need to take into consideration with those sorts of people. One is that it needs to be really easy to use, but number 2 is you just can't have too many clicks to do things. They get frustrated with that sort of stuff. They expect it to be done, and they don't expect to put a lot of work into it. They want to go fix their cars, and even people in the office, they get lots of phone calls and stuff like that. So it really needed to be quick. So look, I mean, I did touch on them. This sort of global searching sort of stuff was great, because they kind of get that sort of concept. They go, that you can search for a customer, or you can search for a vehicle, or you can search for a product or a supplier or whatever. That's a particularly did particularly like that sort of UI and and doing the the quick plus, that sort of stuff. But even things that being able to do certain things in the in the actual screens themselves, the what's the responsiveness. So if this was on a mobile, for example, this stock orders might be underneath here, and this purchase history would be a lot skinnier. Those sorts of things, making it mobile responsive was something that was really easy to, or not easy to do, but really easy to operate.
Could you show what happens when you reduce the screen size? Like, did you go browser?
Yeah. Yeah, so this is what it might look like on something like a mobile, which is again just really simple and very quick and quite effective. So does that give a good indication of what it looks like?
Yeah, slowly.
Yeah. And simple things like the simple operation of the buttons, and you can hide certain things on the screen. So if you wanted to see things on the screen, those sorts of things. I mean, they might seem like simple things, but they just add to the usability and add to the effectiveness of it. And it's pretty obvious what things do. So if you want to click on something, those sorts of things, it's just very easy to navigate.
Okay. So this one, as I mentioned in the presentation, that this is a Linux-based system running Ruby on Rails with a Postgres database running on an Amazon instance, which initially we created this in the US, and then we moved it to Australia to have a faster response time. So if you're going to go global with this, you're able to create instances in other time zones as well. So Oliver, what kind of architecture are we using for workshop software, and then how will it handle growing user requirement, as James mentioned, that we can, he expects to go to several thousand users in a short period of time. What will we have to do in terms of the infrastructure to handle that?
Well, although when you start to grow to really large numbers, to thousands and tens of thousands, there are some other concerns that come up when your scale gets to that sort of size. In general, what we wanted was something that scaled very easily with either no interaction from us or very little interaction from us. And so that was kind of a requirement from the standpoint of how we deployed this sort of application. So for instance, if we see an uptick in growth where we're outrunning our capacity, we can be alerted to it very easily. We have some watches on things like that, and we can say, okay, you have permission to start another instance, and we can go in and just turn on another instance of the application, and all of a sudden he can handle a lot more concurrent users. So essentially it's just a couple of clicks to grow this thing. And in fact, there are some features, we're not necessarily implementing all of them right now, but this is built on with Amazon to work with Elastic Beanstalk, which allows you to even set parameters so that you can have it grow all on its own. So you can say, okay, if my database use goes above this percentage, I may need to mirror the database, and those sorts of things are all very easy to do. And in fact, setting this up to run in different regions. So Amazon has locations throughout the world. It's very easy for us to say, okay, we have our application instance running right now in Australia. We need to spin one up in Europe. And so we tell it to spin that instance up in Europe, and all of a sudden we have a running application in Europe, and Amazon provides a lot of the services that we need to send them to the right location. So it ends up being the system that's pretty easy to shift around that way and to grow. And that's one of the benefits of using some of these other software stacks. This isn't something even specific to Ruby. It's something specific to a lot of these different Linux-based environments that Amazon will host, or whoever will host, Linode, someone like that. it makes scaling these applications trivial in many cases.
And how would you do this in a Windows-based system? Let's say if you were running Windows as an operating system and still had Ruby and other open source on top of that.
So when you're dealing with it's not necessarily just a Windows-based environment, but when you're dealing with the software stacks that haven't been standardized for use on these auto-scaling platforms, things get more complex. So a lot of times you'll have to actually go in and change settings and tweak various things to work with maybe your database cluster or something to that effect. There's a lot more that you have to touch to get it going. It certainly is possible, but there's a lot more human interaction required, and that's really the benefit of these systems, is to reduce that human interaction, which of course reduces mistakes when it comes to growth and deployment as well, which ends up being very critical as you're growing. If your growth can be halted very quickly if a deployment issue holds up existing users' ability to log in or new users to sign up. And so on these Windows-based platforms, it requires that you have a lot more diligence, and you have to be very careful about how you handle things to make sure that you get those settings just right to grow them.
Okay, and we have a few minutes left, but just a very important thing here is the security. So what kind of security have we implemented in the application?
So we've done a lot of things that we've talked about in our webinars, to be honest. We've talked about security in a couple of campfires, and those are the sorts of things we're doing in this application. Not storing passwords at all. We store hashes of passwords. We use secure hashing techniques. Of course, everything is running over SSL. We make sure that one of the things that ends up being very beneficial in a cloud environment is that Amazon can provide the SSL front end, and if we've had some recent open SSL bugs and also issues with SSL implementation on IIS, by using an infrastructure as a service, I don't have to worry about those things. Amazon went in on the fly and updated all of that for me, so that I'm secure from that standpoint. I don't have to patch anything there. So that's one of the big things. Additionally, we used, when you're looking at a multi-tenant database, which is what we have here, we are very dependent on using GUIs throughout the system. So we've talked about this on the DataFlex side of things. You can use them all over in whether you're using a PHP-based system or Ruby in this case. Using GUIs for most of our identifiers in the system basically gives us an extra level of security to make sure that we don't breach tenant boundaries so that one user can't access another user's data. So, those sorts of things, we think about them regularly. Whenever we're implementing features that have to deal with outside services, we take a special look at security also to make sure that our interaction with that third party is secure as well. So all of those things you have to look at very carefully.
Okay. I have a couple of questions here. One is, when you were talking about running Windows in terms of scalability in Windows, whether it was in terms of traditional Windows desktop and servers, or were we talking about Windows Azure implementation? So that we were talking about, because we are using Ruby and Postgres and all of that on Windows, that was in the context of a traditional desktop. Another question here is that, did this application use Murtec evolution? If not, what advantage would it have brought to the table in this project? So right off the bat, well, first of all, Murtec, the evolution product was not ready at the time. So we couldn't use it, but it would have been useful because we could have built the same UI on a DataFlex backend. But when we looked at the system, what we had before, the old workshop software, we saw that it was not very complicated in terms of business processes and logic, and we felt that we could rebuild that in a completely new platform. It was a small enough code base that we could rewrite that fairly quickly. And I think that the core was rewritten probably in less than 3 months or 4 months, something like that.
Yeah.
Right, Oliver?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, if it was available, we could have built this whole thing completely independent of the backend. All the business logic would have come. I think our example of evolution on our website is based loosely on this UI that we developed for James. And you look at the auto entry example with C# and Dataflex. So our evolution goals are very different. It's not just Dataflex, right? We want to provide a multi-protocol interface API development tool for a larger market, or any Windows development for that matter. But yeah, if it was available for a larger, more complex system, we wouldn't have wanted to rewrite it because the cost would have been too high for that.
The other thing that I think is worth mentioning in relation to that is that when we started doing the architecture work on this project, before we wrote a single line of code, we didn't know what backend we were going to use. There was a thought that maybe this was going to end up being a Dataflex backend, based on, because we knew evolution was in the works. We didn't know what quite the time frames were initially and those sorts of things. And Ruby on Rails was an option. PHP was an option. So, but we didn't decide on that until we were a little bit further along. But it didn't change what we were going to do for the user interface and user experience. And it didn't change the way that we were going to actually implement APIs for the application. So I think that's an important part. Those things are independent of the language, and so we were able to do that work before we had even made that decision.
Yeah, and also another thing from a business perspective is, I think, James, you would appreciate that if you're looking at several thousand users over a period of time, and really taking it global, so you're talking tens of thousands of users, probably wouldn't make sense in terms of licensing cost to not use an open source system.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that certainly was was a factor that was I was certainly happy to go down the Linux and the open source sort of road, because I thought that it was something that we could start from scratch and rewrite was, as you say, it was relatively straightforward. It wasn't overly complex that we needed to keep the legacy system. So yeah, it's certainly something that makes life a lot easy, or very easy with in terms of costs and stuff like that. So you've really got your hosting costs, and that's pretty much it, and of course development costs, but in terms of ongoing costs, it's relatively inexpensive to operate.
And there was another challenge that James had with this old system, is that the availability of developers to maintain that system. So this is an open technology and stuff. If James decides not to work with us, well, he can go and find a team of developers who will understand the code. This is not written in any proprietary language or anything that people have to understand. So there's that security. When you're going to invest something in an application, you want it to be open. You don't want it to be closed where you're locking people in. And I found, my experience has been, the more you push people against the wall, the more they want to get away from you. But if you give them openness, if you give them, say, hey, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this, they have no reason to go away from that. And at a reasonable cost. I mean, the cost is very important in all of that. Any other? I don't think we have any other questions. James, any other remark you would like to make?
Look, you touched on it, originally, but one of the things that it needs to be self-served as well. So, very quickly, if we go to the Workshop Software website, it's try it free. It's enter in some details. Go, let's get started. Enter in your name, create your account, and the guys are up and running. So there's nothing that we need to do to help them out. I mean, look, from a sales perspective, we do contact the people and talk to them and things like that. But it is purely a self-service application, which I thought was I mean, it might be an obvious point, but I think it's a really important point. That it just needed to, it's software as a service, literally.
Great. All right, Oliver, you have any comments or any important thing you want to mention?
No, the one other area that I had down here was that you can create a sort of a portal or whatever with like that's what James had with his web application framework based version of workshop software. One of the big advantages that people often overlook is that when you're building software as a service, it's not only the ability to tie into a service like Xero or Repco or someone like that. It's also the ability for others to tie into your service, and that's something that workshop software has that really allows for things we haven't even necessarily thought of right now. And so this sort of API that you get by building a software as a service application in this fashion is also another value in the software stack.
Yes, the ability to create your own ecosystem easily.
Correct.
Yeah. And a great example of this is MailChimp. I think that MailChimp, that email marketing software that I see, it's API based, and you can integrate. I've seen it being integrated across so many different software that I think that's driving a lot of customers to them, because hey, you click here and boom, you have support for an email marketing software into your CRM or whatever software you're using. All right, James, thanks very much for joining us today. Great presentation.
Yeah, appreciate it, Reyes. Thanks for having me. And yeah, look, I hope that that's sort of given people a bit of an indication as to our journey and the experience and that sort of stuff. Look, I'm happy to if people want to get in contact with me directly and ask me some questions or talk to me about the experience, I'm happy to do that. Yeah, and I hope it's enlightened people as to what can be done, and we've certainly been through an interesting journey so far, and yeah, and I'm really excited about the outcome so far and what the future holds for where we're going with with this new it's really a new branch in us as an organisation, and where we're going in the future and what we're going to do. It's really changed a lot of things that, to be honest, originally I didn't think or didn't realise was going to change in terms of how we operate as a business. This has really given us a lot more scope than what we had originally anticipated, and it's been a really interesting journey so far, and I think it's going to be a long and prosperous one as well.
Yeah, I think that we're also very excited about the prospects of this, and I think that the kind of the support you're getting from the industry, I think there's no doubt that you're going to have a great successful product with this. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. We'll be announcing, probably we'll have another webinar in the next month or so.